welcome to this Easter day. Let's say that greeting one more time. You just have to. Ready? Hallelujah, Christ is risen.
Christ is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
You are so good. I had a rather dramatic question asked me one day while my family and I were driving in the car. My grandson, 5-year-old Carlos, who's sitting back there, said, "Grandma, I'm afraid to die." And felt when I heard that, kind of broke my heart, and I said, I know how that is. I am too. And then I said, but it's Easter. Thank God it's Easter. Jesus is risen from the dead, and that makes all the difference. For us, this is the most important 6-word sentence ever said. Jesus is risen from the dead. 6 little words mean so much. Interestingly, people often think in 6-word sentences. There's an online magazine called Smith. It's collected on its website thousands of 6-word sentences. Actually, they turn out to be 6-word autobiographies. All sorts of people have distilled what's important in their lives into 6 little words. These words expresses what's distinguishing or interesting about them. Here are a couple of those 6-word sentences from that website. The first is from a lonely individual who writes, "I still make coffee for 2." Another was written by comedian Stephen Colbert, who wrote, "Well, I thought it was funny." This Smith website was inspired by Ernest Hemingway, who'd been challenged to come up with a story in just 6 words. So he rather poignantly submitted this sentence: "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." Today we're celebrating Christianity's 6-word sentence. It too is a 6-word autobiography. Jesus is risen from the dead. 6 words. 6 very small but very important words that make all the difference. For not one of the million other words in the Bible makes sense without these 6 little words. Not one of us, 2 billion Christians that we are, has a thing to say without these 6 little words. Jesus is risen from the dead. After a visit to an empty tomb, some exhausted women proclaimed them to other disciples. Since then, these words have been passed from person to person, generation to generation. These words have taken us from being a lost, scattered, broken people to the largest religion in the world. These words have been heard by countless people, including you and me, people broken by pain and suffering, by sin and darkness, and we have been given hope of new life. These words are whispered at bedsides and shouted from street corners, shared at dinner tables, workplaces, neighborhoods. These words, these 6 little words, have been forbidden by governments, scorned by unbelievers, yet they're still spoken, still shared. Jesus is risen from the dead. So I ask you, are these words true? Are they true? St. Paul says, "We are of all people most to be pitied if they're not." If these words aren't true, then millions of people have died without purpose. They're not true, and we're already defeated by suffering and by death. Even so, to that darkness and despair, we proclaim with confident faith, Jesus is risen from the dead. Of course, we often hear that Jesus' resurrection can't be proven. nobody saw it. People still suffer and die. It seems so unbelievable. Yet it's to the hopelessness of such logic we still declare with confident faith, Jesus is risen from the dead. So many lives have been changed by these words that it's impossible to measure the effect, the ways in which forgiveness, reconciliation, and self-giving love have brought miracles and abundance to broken and despairing people. Jesus is risen from the dead. These 6 words make all the difference. So what is this difference? I say hope of new life. That's what. When I told my little grandson about this hope of new life after death, he almost jumped out of his seatbelt and yelled, all right, new life. Of course, he had a whole different understanding, but nonetheless, he got the enthusiasm. To be clear, though, this hope of new life isn't the same as optimism. Optimism is based on the belief that we're going to work things out, often by ourselves. The hope in these 6 words are different, much different than optimism. For this hope is based not on what we can do. We so often fail or do it wrong. This hope is not based on what we can do, but on what God is already doing. This hope inspires endurance even when life gets hard, even when our money is run out, even when our health or our heart is broken, even when our loved ones die. For God can do all things and even overcome our greatest fear. That's what he proved on that first Easter morning. And we can therefore stay with confident faith. Jesus is risen from the dead. Yes, Easter brings hope for new life. For God promises to do for us what he's already done for Jesus. God promises that this new life given to his Son is but the first of other eternal life-giving miracles. For God shines hope for new life into the darkness, even the darkness of our fear of death. You know, that first Easter wasn't the end. It's the beginning. For we live, but not without help. Not by ourselves. We live in the hope given by those 6 words. Jesus is risen from the dead. This means we can serve Jesus. We can help him undo the suffering of evil, the destruction of sin, the terror of death. This means we can help in his work that he started, even when there's no end in sight. So I close with 3 6-word sentences. It's Easter. Thank God it's Easter. Jesus is risen from the dead, and that makes all the difference.